Manipulators. They are everywhere. Unfortunately, most of us have found ourselves in the hands of a manipulator at least once in life. We often feel guilty and ashamed, telling ourselves we should have known better. Yet manipulators, especially those who are truly experts at their craft, can be exceedingly difficult to detect. But you can learn to spot manipulators before it's too late and get on the path to healing if you've suffered or are suffering at the hands of a manipulator. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. I'm in my 40s and fresh out of a long term relationship filled with manipulation. I need to heal, but I'm now faced with an aging dad who is being manipulated by a so called girlfriend. Can you help both of us? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love. Please note, as this episode touches on sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. As well, if you need support due to manipulation or concerns about predators, please look for the resources in the show notes.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
As we dive into addressing the question of the day about healing from manipulation and also extricating yourself from a manipulative relationship or helping someone else move out of a manipulative relationship, it's important for us to understand a few key pieces. So first, what is manipulation? Manipulation is the use of psychological tactics, often coercion, to negatively influence another person's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. Manipulation can create harm in a wide variety of arenas, including mental health, emotional health, physical health, sexual health, spirituality, and financial well-being. Various terms are used to define manipulators. You might hear somebody call a manipulator a predator, a schemer, an exploiter, or Machiavellian. So when we look at manipulators, we also want to see that manipulation occurs on a continuum. So there are degrees of manipulation. Somebody can be mildly manipulative, not that that's healthy, moderately or extraordinarily manipulative, and that's the most unhealthy. So who do manipulators target? Manipulators tend to target those who are vulnerable in some way. Sadly, manipulators tend to prey on those who are good-hearted, trusting, weak, or naive. And it's regrettable that manipulators seem to have a sixth sense, and they choose to use that sixth sense to be damaging, to be self-serving. And manipulators rarely target those who they perceive to be strong, dominant, wise, or highly assertive, but no one is immune from a manipulator. They do strive to gain leverage so that they can have power and control over the target. And many people, and this is part of the healing process, will say, is it me? Do I attract manipulators? Do I have a sign on my forehead that says manipulate me? No, it's not your fault. Manipulators are skilled at targeting their victims. They read a room, they read a situation, a party, an online forum, a parking lot. They read situations to find out who will be a good target. And although you may have a history such as unresolved childhood abuse or parents that modeled manipulation that make you more vulnerable to predatory behavior, it's not your fault. The good news is if you are prone to be receptive to manipulators simply because it was something that was modeled as being okay or normal, you can learn to heal. You can learn to spot the red flags. And the manipulator, not the victim, is fully responsible for their vile behavior. And sadly, the targets of the manipulation often take on that sense of it's my fault. but it's not your fault. And your best protection moving forward and the road to healing involves increasing your self awareness, increasing your boundaries, and increasing other awareness, especially about red flag behaviors. And we'll dive into that quite a lot. And another piece is that our world is very disconnected. In the past, we tended to live in smaller towns where schemers and manipulators, they were caught more easily and held accountable more easily. But in today's world, we're often very isolated, lonely, disenfranchised, and the online world is the perfect screen for manipulators. So again, there are more places for the manipulators to hide. And again, you didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'd like to be manipulated today. Let me put out a welcome mat for manipulators. No, no, no. Manipulators slither into your life. It's their modus operandi, their MO. They sneak in and they target you slowly, and surreptitiously. So that's the piece to know about manipulators. They are so crafty that you don't realize you're being manipulated. And then one day you wake up, whether it's days, weeks, months, years, and you say, oh my goodness, I've been manipulated. I'm so stupid. No, you're not stupid. It's simply that manipulators are very skilled at taking advantage of other people. And they work very hard, especially at first, to not alert you to how devious they are, to the true nature of their personality. Um, so, where can manipulation occur? Manipulation can occur anywhere there are people. In any environment, you are sure to find some manipulative people. So, they can be present in family environments, friendships, professional environments, investment realms, work environments, and certainly in romantic relationships. Manipulators present in a wide variety of ways. There may be a very overtly bullying manipulator at work or down the block. You can see the love bombing manipulator in the dating world, the crazy making manipulator, guilt tripping manipulator in a family, or the charismatic salesman type manipulator in a social investment or personal romantic setting. So, where do manipulators come from? How do they get to be manipulators? Well, in general, most of our personalities are a combination of genetic factors, childhood environment, and innate personality. And that's the same with a manipulator. The manipulator may be born with a propensity for being manipulative. It might be just part of the personality. But often it's the childhood environment, not always, but often the childhood environment where there's abuse, neglect, where there's substance abuse, alcohol addiction, all of these components that a child may learn from parents modeling the behavior. The child may learn to imitate that behavior and think it's normal. And then as that child grows up and moves through life, the behaviors become more ingrained, more hardwired. And so often it's the childhood environment that is a big part of it. Does that mean that we can't have somebody be a manipulator if they grew up in a really lovely childhood environment? Absolutely not. There are manipulators who definitely come from good backgrounds, solid, secure backgrounds. But when we're looking at attachment, often it is someone who has very insecure attachment who is manipulative, and they learn that in childhood as a way of getting their needs met. It started as a coping skill, and then it became part of their character. So that's an important piece to know. Also, there are underlying mental health issues, of course, when we have someone on that continuum, that spectrum where, again, we can have very low manipulation, a child just learning to test out the world and might try to manipulate a parent into giving them ice cream or a treat. That's just normal learned behavior and experimental behavior. And in a healthy environment, the parent would say, no, 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 let's talk about things. Let's be straightforward and respectful and ask for what we want. We don't want to cry or throw a temper tantrum or be passive aggressive, those things. And so the parent would model healthy behavior and teach the child how to engage in healthy ways. However, for somebody who is learning to be manipulative, they just learn more and observe more and use those strategies more and more rather than learning healthy behaviors. They learn how to manipulate better and better over time. So we often see that for somebody who on that continuum of manipulation, really on the far end of the spectrum, there's often an underlying mental health personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder are two of the common personality disorders we see with exceedingly manipulative people. So, um, but that doesn't mean that every manipulator has an underlying personality disorder. I want to be clear about that. So, um, the next piece is, what are the personality traits of someone who's manipulative? Again, the personality traits also occur on a spectrum, and we can see some of these characteristics occurring in mild ways or extremely severe ways. And they tend to be highly exploitative, highly self serving, dishonest, overconfident. They may certainly lack empathy. They can tend to be very suspicious, dominant, remorseless, impulsive, coercive, inconsiderate, lack accountability, definitely, and merciless. They will do what they need to do and want to do to get their needs met. Manipulators also tend to admire other manipulators. For example, they may idolize a manipulative politician and talk about how impressed they are by the highly calculated strategies. So those are some of the personality traits and characteristics of manipulative people. Let's look at the stages of manipulation. So for the question of the day, and we really think about this woman who's out of this long-term manipulative relationship, and then the dad, this older man who is in the throes of manipulation with a so-called girlfriend, it doesn't generally happen overnight. There are 4 stages. And the first is targeting. So the manipulator is in a party, a bar, an online forum. It can even be, a church setting, a work setting, any setting is game for the manipulator. And they're targeting the person. They're looking and saying, okay, is this person single? Do they have any financial resources? Do they have people in their lives who are watching over them and caring about them? And if the person being targeted is a child, they're looking to see, does that child, have a safe and secure home environment? Are the parents very watchful? Will the child tell on me? Will the child report me to to their parents? And all of these things are part of the targeting stage. And in a romantic relationship, of course, the manipulator is looking and saying, is this somebody I can take advantage of? Are their finances accessible? Maybe they'll let me move into their home so I can save on rent. What can I get out of the situation? That's what the manipulator is looking for. In financial schemes, say pyramid schemes, they're looking at how gullible is the person? Do they have money that they can invest? And they don't care if it's your last ounce of savings that they're extracting from you. They care that they get that last ounce of savings. They don't care if it leaves you penniless. That's the remorseless part. So in the targeting stage, the manipulator is factoring in all of these components. They're doing the math, so to speak. Then, once the manipulator has found the right target, this is good. This person is ripe for the picking. Then they start building a friendship. They may do this online or in person. They may do it through love letters, any sort of maneuver that will help them build a friendship connection. They may say, oh, I love doing this with you. Oh, you like to walk? I like to walk. You like to hike? I like to hike. Oh, you like to cook? I like to cook. Even if it's not true, they'll pretend to like what you like to build that friendship. And especially in the cyber world, online world, they may, somebody, for example, an elder person can be targeted by somebody saying they're a young female who wants to, be their girlfriend, and it may be a male in another country. So we have to be very aware that these predators are out there. So they build a friendship, and then they build love. Third is the love stage. So they take the friendship to another level. They're grooming the target to really be connected to them emotionally. They're trying to build this bond. Are they really in love? Are they really trying to build love? No, they're trying to get their hold on you in a more concrete way. They don't even know what love is in the true sense of the word. And so the love building stage, it doesn't have to be romantic love. It can be a sort of familial love, a spiritual love, a sense of we are soulmates, or in financial schemes, it can be a sense of indebtedness. Like, okay, we're in this together. Let's have this family of love, sort of a cult like type of love. Finally, and in the third to fourth stage comes the abuse. So, right in between the love building and the abuse, there is enough power, enough control that the abuse starts. And it doesn't start overnight. That's why the person wakes up and says, "Oh my God, how did I get here? I'm so dumb. Why am I tolerating this?" Because it happens slowly. The abuse doesn't happen all at once. It's love and abuse, and then more abuse, and then a little dose of love. And we'll talk about that later. But that is how it works. Targeting, friendship formation, love building, and abuse. They are not four discrete stages. They become merged as one moves to the other. So that is how the manipulator works. It's always that four-stage process. And interestingly enough, at the very beginning, and it's not a surprise, no one would open their heart to somebody who's heavy-handed and mean. The manipulator moves in very shiny, very charismatic, and it's slowly over time that they become heavy-handed and more of an overt abuser. And so that's how they work. So signs of manipulation. How can we become more aware of manipulators? And this is part of the path to healing for both the person who wrote in and for her father. As we learn to be aware of the signs, we can step back and see it's not our fault. We were vulnerable, but we can start healing by saying, "Oh, now I can recognize this. Now I can learn to detach. I can spot this for myself and for other people. Now that I've been through this and know this firsthand, now I can help my child, my sibling, my partner, my parents, my best friend." And that's part of the healing journey. So let's look at some of these signs of manipulation. And of course, they vary depending upon the type of relationship. But one common theme is the creation and use of a power dynamic that serves the manipulator's end goal. And that is what ultimately harms the target, is that power dynamic, that abuse, that manipulation. So, for example, in a romantic relationship, the manipulator often tends to crush over time the victim's sense of self-worth and sense of reality. Why? To have control in the relationship. In a family environment, we might see a manipulative parent or caregiver gaining power and control over a child to engage in emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual exploitation. And sometimes, it's ongoing over time where a parent will be the manipulator just for the sake of guilt tripping a child to have emotional control. In a work environment, a supervisor, this is an example, may use manipulative tactics to gain sexual favors, to unfairly increase or take credit for a coworker's work products. And then in society as a whole, we often see signs of manipulation that are overt coercion, which are threats and force, or more subtle manipulative tactics for personal gain, often financial. For example, financial fraud, manipulating a person by selling them a product we know the person can't afford or doesn't need, or using private behaviors such as nude selfies to extort money from someone. And that's where the manipulator might take advantage of a child or an adult and get them to send them nude pictures or somehow get them indebted to them, to have control over them, and then extort money, often with dire consequences for the person who is manipulated and then feels so ashamed that they may even take their own life. And we're seeing more of that. So we really want to be aware that if a manipulator has their hold on you, it's not your fault. And you can get help. You can get support. And whatever that manipulator has over you, you can get help. You can get support, and it is not your fault. You may have done something you're not proud of, but it's still not your fault. It's not your fault that you are at the mercy of a manipulator. So let's look at some of the specific common signs of manipulation. At first, you may feel very seen and heard by the manipulator. That's how they get entry into your life. The beginning, and as long as you're giving them their way, they are often uplifting and they make you feel good. Yet, while you're thinking, oh, this is authentic, I've never been seen like this before, this person cares about me, there's an end game with the manipulator. They don't know genuine love. They only know how to get you to do something they want to do. And they're often very patient at the beginning. You also, here's another piece, is you may feel strangely drawn into an unhealthy situation, even sort of a web, despite sensing that something's off. You might doubt your own perceptions of the situation, and this is the allure of the manipulator. They almost get you in a little bubble where you might be feeling like there's something strange going on, but you're not sure what it is. Often it's a sort of a heady feeling, this light, oh my goodness feeling. The next piece is that you may be ignoring red flags and you may be ignoring your own gut instinct. In fact, the manipulator may tell you everything is fine and that you're imagining something or that your radar is off. And you may be feeling anxious or a creeping sense of self doubt, but the manipulator or you may be saying, mm-mm, everything's fine, everything's fine. The next piece is you may experience as the relationship moves on, especially as we get closer to that abuse stage, you may feel lower self esteem, constant self doubt, confusion, anxiety, depression, and certainly helplessness that comes from being disempowered. And this leads to the next piece. If you say no or show doubt to the manipulator, that switch may flip and you may see that dark side. It might be covered up very quickly by a skilled manipulator, but you may notice that you're getting glimpses of this other personality. Um, Now, let's look at the strategies, the key red flag strategies that the manipulator uses. Now, they tend to be very artful when it comes, and we've talked about this, at reading people's needs, weaknesses, blind spots. So their strategies are consciously and unconsciously crafted so that they can achieve their end goal. They're really working somewhat hard, but it's natural to them to use the right strategies for the right target. So, first, pressure by the manipulator. It can be subtle or overt, but manipulators, although they can appear authentic, you can see that if you step back, you can see the salesman like quality to them. You can see the kind of sheen has crackles in it because there's inauthenticity underneath. And time, which is one thing the manipulator doesn't have, will generally unmask the manipulator. And that's why the manipulator knows that time works against them. So they'll often push and you'll feel a sense of urgency because they know they need to get you before you become wise to them. So that's that initial targeting and friendship and love building stage. There's often urgency in there because they need to get you in their trap before you become aware, because once you're aware, you might leave. Next, manipulators tend to be very gifted storytellers. They can be very good at crafting tales that make it difficult for you to separate fact from fiction. And if you talk to them and ask them about the stories, they will often find a way to, if you say, well, this part didn't add up in this story, they'll find a way to go around it and continue to tell another story so that you get lost in more stories. And they often have sort of a self-serving goal with their stories, whether it's to boost their own ego, your ego, to attack somebody else's self-confidence, to attack someone else in your life who is supportive. So again, pay attention to their art of storytelling. They also tend to lack congruity, and that's a piece with the storytelling. Things, if you step back, you'll start seeing that things don't add up. As you learn to observe, you'll see that their details are often inconsistent. And although we sometimes think, well, manipulators must be highly intelligent, it's more that they're crafty. They're exceedingly devious, often charismatic, and it is their duplicitous, self-serving natures that make them so dangerous. So we want to notice again that they tend to not have the congruity. The stories won't match up. And if you say, could you explain more? They'll clamp down or get defensive. The next piece, and we've talked about this, they have a mask of kindness, that this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of personality, and especially if confronted or questioned, that kindness can, oops, it will turn to anger. Another piece is they can be very evasive. They are skilled at doing everything they can to line their own pockets to get their own needs met. So, for example, they may take you to dinner and run to the bathroom when it's time to pay the bill. They may say, "Oh, I'll get you a gift and you could get me a gift in return." And you show up with this gift that maybe you couldn't afford. And they're like, I I'm not bringing you a gift. I didn't say I was bringing you a gift. So again, evasiveness, and they'll have a reason for it. Somewhere in their mind, they will have come up with a reason why they don't need to keep their end of the deal. And that leads us to the next piece. They avoid responsibility. They are highly gifted at avoiding responsibility. They don't like personal accountability. So if you try and get them to be accountable for something they've promised, they don't like it. And if you try to get them to write a promise down, oh no, they don't like it. They don't like accountability. If something that the manipulator proposes as an idea and you follow it, if it goes awry, it's never their fault. Then it becomes your idea. But if something goes well, then of course it was the manipulator's idea, even if it wasn't their idea. They also um, will always find a way to make an excuse for whatever they did. It's your fault. It's their boss's fault. It's the system's fault. It's somebody else's fault, but never the manipulators. And the rules don't apply to manipulators. According to them, there are two standards, one for the manipulator and one for the rest of the world. And last but not least, manipulators tend to go into a cycle of reward and pain. And this is really difficult. I'll explain why. If you try to get away from a manipulator, especially in a romantic relationship, they will often say, "Oh, I've learned my lesson. I'm so sorry. Everything will be different." And then they draw you back in. "I will change." And what this does, and it also happens in family relationships, the abusive manipulative cycle erodes self-esteem, self-worth, and the ability to notice and engage in healthy, intimate dynamics. And so the manipulator will do the pain reward cycle to the point where you're almost getting through the pain just to get to the next reward, because you know that somewhere down the line they will give you something positive. And this is called intermittent reinforcement. And research shows it is the type of reinforcement that can do the most damage because it keeps us engaged. We are like little puppy dogs just waiting for that next pet, that next, little treat in between the abuse. So that is a specialty of the manipulator. Now, when we look at some of their verbal tactics, they're very good with words. Manipulators are. They'll use their verbal tactics to boost your ego, to boost your self-confidence. And that's why people who tend to have low self-confidence or low self-worth can be especially vulnerable to manipulators. And in romantic relationships, phrases such as, "I love you, like you deserve to be loved. You're everything to me," especially when you've been on 5 dates with them. And in romantic family and friendship settings, the manipulator may use the word love as bait, as sort of honey, even when their actions are anything but loving. So they will say, "I love you," and at the same time, they'll be kicking you. "I love you," but they'll be talking about you behind your back. "I love you," but they'll be stealing from you. So that's the piece. Manipulators don't know love in the authentic sense of the word. And we're not talking about imperfect love here where we all mess up a little bit and we try and do better. The manipulator is just very interested in using the word love to get their needs met, never to do better in the relationship, not authentically. They also are known for their salesman-like phrases such as, "You'll feel so much better if you do this. You really need to do this for yourself. Everyone will think the world of you if." And so their phrases are crafted to often boost your ego. Why? So that you'll do something for them, so that you'll be compliant. They're also very good at wordplay and doublespeak. Anyone who knows a manipulator has known that they have an artful way of getting you to believe in whatever they want you to believe. They may say, um, give me money or nudge you to let them move in, and then later say, "Oh, thank you. That was such a good idea of yours to give me that money or to invite me to move in." And you're saying, "What? I don't recall doing that." And this creates the confusion, and manipulators thrive when they create confusion in somebody else's mind. So, manipulators, guilt. They thrive in using guilt to make people do what they want. They use guilt to foster compliance. You should do this. You owe it to me. If you loved me, you would. You, you're part of my religious group. God wants you to do this. I want you to do this. The world wants you to do this. Again, see the guilt tripping part of it. Not using general, basic human compassion and respect for boundaries, but instead using guilt tripping tactics to get their needs met. They're also very good at blaming other people. It's your fault. And why do they do this? Because if it's your fault, they avoid responsibility, they feel better, and they increase your self doubt. Shame. They're very good at shaming. They will often mercilessly shame their victims into meeting their needs, doing what they want. Why? Again, if you can be shamed, you become more compliant because your sense of self worth is lower. And manipulators are exceedingly good at shaming people. Again, we see this with the use of somebody's past behaviors. Even if they've apologized for them or move forward in life, they will use somebody's old behavior or maybe a selfie, something like that, to shame them into submission. They're also very good at deflecting. And what is deflecting? Deflecting is when they divert attention to something else. You're trying to get an answer, you're trying to talk them about one thing, and they're talking about something completely unrelated. Why? To create the confusion, to avoid responsibility. They also tend to, especially in the later stages where there's more abuse, they tend to complain and they make always or never statements when there's no foundation or evidence, but they're very good at complaining, especially about you if you're not doing something that they want you to do. They're also very good at being critical and with pointed sarcasm. Why? To erode your self esteem. The manipulator, especially in that abusive stage, will say things like, "If you were smart, you would. If only you weighed a little less, I'd be attracted to you. It's not my fault I look at other women or men. It's just that XYZ. It's not my fault that I took money from your bank account. It's because you did this." So again, this ties back into the part about excuses, but they will always have a way to justify their critical or unsavory behavior and attitudes. So let's look at how we can respond to manipulators. With our listener who is healing and now she wants to help her dad extricate himself from that situation and move forward. Here's how we can respond to manipulators. First, before I go even, any further into it, remember that your physical, emotional, mental, sexual, spiritual, financial, all of those areas, all of those areas of your health are paramount. So if you are currently in an abusive situation, some of these steps may not apply. It may be directly to 911 or to some of the resources that will be in the show notes, cyberbullying, that sort of thing. Sometimes we don't want to pause. We want to immediately get the support we need. So that's the first thing. Always, if you are in an unsafe situation or a child or an elder is in an unsafe situation or, somebody that you're aware of needs immediate help, there are resources. There are police departments. There are federal government departments. Again, look in the show notes, but that's the first step. Always assess for safety. Next, if you are in a situation with a manipulator, family, romantic, social setting, where you are safe generally, but you want to respond in healthier ways, use these tips. First, this one's so important. Work to observe the manipulator as you learn to step back and become more objective, kind of like a researcher, rather than getting drawn into that web. You'll see the red flag behaviors that we talked about. They'll become more obvious. And when they become more obvious, they become easier to avoid. So you can use your boundaries and other coping skills more mindfully once you learn to step back and observe the manipulator, to observe their traits and their tendencies. And as you're doing that, this is the next piece, give yourself time to evaluate, to take a step back and assess. And this is really works against manipulators. Thus, it works for you. Take a time out, leave the room, say you need to consider your options, say you need to think. So get yourself out of the hot seat. So whether it's a financial situation, a romantic situation, or something with, your family or work, whatever, you have the right to say, I need to consider this. I want to reflect on this. I want to research this. Or a simple no. And you get to exit the situation. So that leads us to the next piece. Use your boundaries. Your boundaries are critical. And many people who fall prey to manipulators don't have good boundaries because they didn't learn good boundaries growing up. So it's important to know boundaries, to state them, and to be willing to walk away from the manipulator. And the best boundary, and many of us are not familiar with it, is the word no. You don't need to give an explanation. You don't need to give an excuse. You can simply say no. If you want, you can say, no, I won't. No, I don't want to. No, that's not right for me. But saying no is one of your best strategies. Manipulators don't like the word no. Why? Because it works against their agenda. Use I messages. So if you're in a relationship with a manipulator, use I messages. You can say, I feel confused when you do this. I feel concerned when that happens. I feel irritated when you deflect. I feel angry when you tell me you're going to do something and you don't. Doesn't mean that the manipulator will be able to reflect back to you or use I messages, but no one can argue with how you feel. Those are your feelings, so you get to state them. And the manipulator, sadly, can even take your I statements and try and twist them, but you just hold your ground and use your I messages. I feel, I need. I feel, I need. That's one of your best tools. Next, don't engage in conflict with the manipulators. Manipulators love the confusion they can create in conflict. So try not to take the bait. I know it's hard, but learn to disengage. Disengage, observe. Because manipulators don't want to listen. They don't want to have a healthy dialogue with you. They want to win and they never want to hear reason. They just want you to be compliant. Next, avoid using your energy to try to outsmart or get back at a manipulator. It's not worth it. Instead, use your energy for self care, personal growth, journaling so you can process and track your reality. Again, this is all if you're choosing to stay with a manipulator, or, sometimes we have manipulators in our families and we want to be part of the family environment, but we want to be able to do better with the manipulator. And in cases like that, we want to use our energy to just, really engage in good self-care. So, for example, after maybe a family dinner with people who are guilt tripping and manipulative, you might go home and journal about it so that you realize, hey, I didn't engage. I did better this time. I used I messages. I'm really stepping back. That's one of our best things. One of the best things we can do is just learn to step back and not engage. Next, consult with someone you trust to get support, to get validation, just have a place to talk. And this one is important. This is the next piece. Try not to label yourself as a victim, because then you can create a pattern in your head that you are a target, rather than saying, I was victimized, I was manipulated, but I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. I am going to really learn how to spot these manipulators. And if I get taken advantage of again, and the world's full of manipulators, so you'll know how to extricate yourself more quickly. And that's the wonderful thing. And then get support for healing, a psychologist, a domestic violence support group, your primary care physician. In many cases, domestic violence resources can be incredibly helpful, because the abuse, it's not just physical abuse, it's the emotional, mental, often financial, spiritual abuse that comes with it. And so domestic violence support groups and their resources are for people who've been abused in any way, not just physically. Um, and then remember that when you help yourself, you help others, because when we help others and not judge them, then we can help stop the manipulators by holding the manipulators accountable, spreading the word about healthy awareness, red flag awareness. And so again, back to the question for today with this individual's dad, she could then go to her dad using all of this information and say, Dad, I think that this is what's happening with your so-called girlfriend or your girlfriend. And this is what I'm observing. And I want you to know, I want to be honest with you, I've been manipulated and taken advantage of, and that's why I've left my relationship with so and so. And I want you to know that that's why I can see what's happening. And I'm not judging you. I'm just concerned for you. And I love you. And I want to be vulnerable with you and tell you what I experienced and how hard it was. And so Dad, let's use these skills I learned to step back and look at your relationship to see if we can step back and observe what's happening. And again, the dad must be vulnerable in some way. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe he's just really craving companionship, which is natural. We crave companionship. So maybe one of the things she can do as they evaluate the situation is get him involved in a senior center or in groups with like-minded people who are safe and, in real time rather than, the virtual world, which can be a little more iffy, and give him the ability to interact with people who are loving, who care about him. He may also need psychological support. He may need a therapist. He may need somebody to look at his finances to see if those have been, if they're intact, and maybe to create some safety around his finances so that he is not prey for other people. So we can see how all of these pieces weave together when we approach it in a non-judgmental way, not blaming ourselves, shaming ourselves, guilting ourselves, but realizing that the manipulator, they are the ones who are responsible for their incredibly heinous behavior, and that it's our responsibility to stand up in safe ways, to reach out for help, to not be ashamed. Again, the people that we reach out to, the law enforcement, and the government agencies, and the psychological support, no one would ever be appropriate in judging you. Instead, they are there to support you, to help you heal, to help you move forward. So, last but not least, if you choose to stay with a manipulator, and then you can try to seek mutual counsel. But often, even in couples therapy, the manipulator doesn't want to change because it's generally at this degree characterological. It's within who they are, and they don't want to change. It has served them. They're afraid of the change, and they want to stay in the same behavior patterns. If they do want to change, oh my goodness, with concerted effort, with hard work, we can all rewire our brains. That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. We have the power to change for the worse and for the better. And that's the piece, that we can all change. And if a manipulator wants to change and wants to do the work to change step by step by step, they can absolutely become a healthier, more whole human being rather than being stuck in this really dark segment of their personality. So for those who have been manipulated, who have been taken advantage of, the key is to work on boundaries, getting emotional and often physical distance from the manipulative people, creating good self-care, such as journaling, exercise, eating in, healthy ways, getting good sleep, getting the support from friends, family, mental health support, group therapy support, and time. Now, time on its own will never heal our psychological wounds. We want to realize that it's the time coupled with the self-work that allows us to heal, and the support of other people. And remember, in again, just as an aside to domestic violence support groups, it's not just about people getting battered. Domestic violence involves all of these other forms of abuse, and people of all different backgrounds are part of domestic violence groups. Wealthy people, people without financial resources, homeless people, people that in the community that you might think, oh, they would never be abused. There's a lot of abuse out there. Um, and that's its own podcast episode. So as you move forward, one of your key strategies as you move forward is review what happened in the manipulative relationship. Never to blame or shame or guilt yourself, but review it through the lens of a researcher, that objectivity where you can see what happened. You can see where you were vulnerable. You can see how the manipulator got into your world, just like you're kind of watching a movie objectively. Why are we doing this? So that we can replay it in a positive way. So that we can shift it and say, okay, that happened, but in the future, I'd do it this way. Oh, that happened. In the future, I'd do it this way. And you're increasing your wisdom. You're increasing your awareness by doing that. You're never guilting or saying, oh, I was so stupid. Don't do that to yourself. Instead, I'm getting more aware. I'm getting wiser. Now I can share this with my friends. I can share it with my family. I can share it with myself and really see that it's the growth, it's the healing that helps us get stronger in the face of the next manipulator and helps us keep them at bay and helps us protect the people we care about. So the self-awareness, and that's what we're talking about. Increase your self-awareness and your other awareness. Remember the red flags. And there are many more I didn't mention, but you just want to increase your awareness of these very foundational characteristics of manipulators. So, as we bring things to a close, remember it's not your fault. You deserve to be loved, safe, and secure. You deserve to be able to trust. Sadly, in the real world, not everyone deserves your trust. So, moving forward, your best defense against a manipulator is to make them earn your trust and your respect. Make them earn it. And if they won't or can't earn both your trust and your respect, you might want to walk or run away. This is Dr. Carla Marie Manley, doing my best to help raise your awareness and help you through these very imperfect parts of life.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.